June 9, 1963, Winona, Mississippi. Inside the Montgomery County Jail, Fannie Lou Hamer, 45 years old, lies face down on a concrete floor. Two black prisoners stand over her, holding blackjack's leather straps filled with lead. A white highway patrolman stands behind them with his hand on his gun. He gives the order. Beat her. Beat her until she wishes she was dead. The first man raises the blackjack. He doesn't want to do this. They threatened him. They told him if he doesn't beat this woman, he'll be next. He brings the weapon down, again and again. The sound of leather hitting flesh echoes off the concrete walls. Fannie screams. The highway patrolman laughs. He tells the prisoner to hit her harder. When the first man's arm gets tired, they switch. The second prisoner takes over. More blows, more screaming. Blood pools on the floor. Fannie's kidneys rupture. Her eye fills with blood. Her leg goes numb. She can't feel her body anymore. She said later that they beat her until her body became hard like a piece of wood. Through the pain, through the torture, she hears one of the officers say something that makes her blood run cold. We could throw her in the big black river, and nobody would ever find her. What was Fannie Lou Hamer's crime? What did this 45-year-old woman do that made them torture her nearly to death? She tried to register to vote. That's it. She taught other black people to register to vote. And in Mississippi, in 1963, that was a death sentence. But here's what they didn't count on. 1 year later, Fannie Lou Hamer would stand before the entire nation at the Democratic National Convention. She would tell America exactly what happened in that jail cell. She would look into television cameras broadcasting live to millions of Americans and ask one simple question. Is this America? President Lyndon Johnson was so terrified of her testimony that he called an emergency press conference to get the networks to cut away from her speech. But they played it again that night during prime time. The whole country heard what Mississippi did to a woman who dared to vote. The whole country heard Fannie Lou Hamer's voice, and American politics would never be the same. This is not a story about a victim. This is a story about a warrior. This is about a woman who picked cotton for 44 years and didn't even know she had the right to vote. This is about a woman who was forcibly sterilized in a hospital without her consent. This is about a woman who was beaten nearly to death and went back to organizing voters the next week. This is about a woman who challenged the entire Democratic Party and won. Everything you learned about voting rights was sanitized. They taught you about peaceful marches and patient suffering. They taught you about Rosa Parks sitting on a bus and Martin Luther King giving speeches. But they never taught you about Fannie Lou Hamer. They never taught you what it actually cost to vote. They never taught you that people were tortured, murdered, and disappeared for trying to register. They never taught you that the right to vote had to be taken by force, because America would never give it freely. This isn't ancient history. Fannie Lou Hamer died in 1977. Your parents were alive. Many of you watching this were alive. Her children are still alive today. Her story was buried not in the distant past, but in your lifetime. And today, that burial ends. By the end of this video, you'll know why a 44-year-old woman in Mississippi in 1962 had no idea black people could vote. You'll know why she was forcibly sterilized without her consent, and why thousands of other black women suffered the same fate in what they called a Mississippi appendectomy. You'll know exactly what happened in that Winona jail cell detail by detail, because Fannie testified about it under oath. You'll know how she challenged the Democratic Party at their national convention and forced them to change their rules forever. And you'll understand why they erased her from your history books. Because Fannie Lou Hamer was too radical, too angry, too dangerous, and too truthful for the sanitized version of history they wanted you to learn. This is your history. This affects your life today. If you've ever wondered why voting is still so difficult in certain neighborhoods, this is why. If you've ever wondered why black families don't own land or wealth, this is why. If you've ever wondered why your grandmother was so passionate about voting in every single election, now you'll know. She lived this. She survived this. She knew what it cost. And after you know, you can never unknow it. After you hear Fannie's story, you'll see America differently. You'll see voting differently. You'll see your own power differently. Because Fannie Lou Hamer proved that one woman with nothing but courage and truth can shake the foundations of the most powerful nation on earth. Let's begin. Fannie Lou Hamer was born on October 6, 1917, in Montgomery County, Mississippi. Born on a plantation. Born into sharecropping, which was slavery by another name. Her birth name was Fannie Lou Townsend. She was the youngest of 20 children. 20. Her parents, Jim and Ella Townsend, were sharecroppers who picked cotton from sunup to sundown, worked themselves nearly to death, and stayed poor their entire lives. Think about being the 20th child born into that system. Think about what that means. Your parents already have 19 mouths to feed. Your family lives in a shack with no electricity, no running water, no heat except a wood stove. You sleep 4 or 5 children to a bed. You eat whatever scraps you can grow or catch. And from the moment you can walk, you work. Fannie started picking cotton when she was 6 years old. 6. She should have been playing. She should have been learning to read. Instead, she was bent over in cotton fields under the Mississippi sun, dragging a sack twice her size, picking cotton to make white landowners rich, while her family stayed hungry. She went to school when she could. She made it to 6th grade. 6th grade. Then she had to drop out permanently because her family needed her in the fields full time. 6 years of education. That's all she got. But let me tell you something about Fannie Lou Hamer. She had 6 years of formal schooling, and she would go on to outsmart lawyers, politicians, and presidents. Because education isn't just what happens in a classroom. Education is what happens when you survive a system designed to destroy you, and you come out knowing exactly how that system works. Sharecropping was supposed to be different from slavery. That's what they told black people after the Civil War ended. You're free now. You can work the land and earn money and build a life. But it was a lie. Sharecropping was slavery with a paycheck that never came. Here's how it worked. A white landowner owned thousands of acres of farmland. He'd allow black families to live on his land and farm it. At the end of the harvest season, the sharecropper would give the landowner half of the crops. That was the rent. Then the landowner would take out money for seeds, tools, housing, and anything else the family needed during the year. Whatever was left, if anything was left, belonged to the sharecropper. But here's the trick. The landowner kept the books. The landowner decided how much everything cost. The landowner decided how much the crops were worth. And somehow, every single year, the sharecropper ended up owing the landowner money. You worked all year, produced thousands of pounds of cotton, and ended up deeper in debt. You couldn't leave because you owed money. If you tried to leave, they'd arrest you for theft or unpaid debts. If you complained, they'd evict you, or worse. Fannie Lou Hamer lived this way for 44 years. She married Perry Hamer in 1944. Everyone called him Pap. He was a sharecropper too. They worked on the W.D. Marlowe plantation in Ruleville, Mississippi. They worked there for 18 years. 18 years of backbreaking labor. 18 years of picking cotton, planting crops, maintaining the land. 18 years of working sunrise to sunset. Fannie became the timekeeper on the plantation. That means she was the person who recorded how much cotton each worker picked. She could read and write and do math better than most. The white landowner trusted her with the numbers because she was accurate and honest. Think about that. She was smart enough and trustworthy enough to manage the plantation's records, but she was still making almost nothing. She still lived in a shack. She still couldn't leave. And here's something they don't teach you about Fannie Lou Hamer. In 1961, when she was 43 years old, she went to the hospital for minor surgery. She had a small tumor in her uterus. The doctor said it would be a simple procedure. Remove the tumor, go home, recover. But when Fannie woke up from surgery, something was wrong. She felt different. She didn't know what it was at first. It took time for her to realize the truth. The white doctor had performed a hysterectomy. He removed her uterus completely. He sterilized her without her knowledge, without her consent, without even telling her what he was doing. Fannie Lou Hamer went into that hospital able to have children. She came out permanently sterilized, and she had no idea until later. She and Pop wanted children desperately. They never could have their own. They adopted 2 girls, the daughters of relatives who couldn't care for them. But Fannie's womb was stolen from her by a white doctor who decided she shouldn't reproduce. And she wasn't alone. This happened to thousands of black women across the South. Thousands. They called it a Mississippi appendectomy. It was so common that black people had a name for it. You'd go to the hospital for something minor, appendicitis, a cyst, a small surgery, and you'd wake up sterilized. No consent, no conversation, no choice. Why did they do this? Because eugenics was still popular among white supremacists in the South. Eugenics is the belief that you can improve society by controlling who has children. They didn't want poor black people having children. They didn't want black families growing. So they sterilized black women in secret. Doctors did it. Hospitals allowed it. The state knew about it and did nothing. Fannie Lou Hamer would later testify about this. She would tell the nation that they stole her ability to have children. She would expose the Mississippi appendectomy and force America to confront the fact that forced sterilization of black women was widespread and ongoing. But that comes later. In 1961, she didn't even know it had happened yet. She just knew she felt broken. She just knew something had been taken from her, and she didn't have the words for it yet. This is who Fannie Lou Hamer was in 1962. A 44-year-old sharecropper, 6th grade education, forcibly sterilized, living in poverty, working land she'd never owned for a white man who paid her almost nothing, trapped in a system designed to keep her exactly where she was until she died. And then in the summer of 1962, everything changed. August 1962, a church meeting in Ruleville, Mississippi. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, came to town. These were young organizers, black and white, who were traveling through the South, registering black people to vote. They held a meeting at the Williams Chapel Missionary Baptist Church. They invited local black residents to come learn about their rights. Fannie Lou Hamer went to that meeting. She didn't know what to expect. She'd never been political. She'd never been an activist. She was just tired. Tired of picking cotton. Tired of being poor. Tired of watching her people suffer. So she went to see what these young people had to say. James Foreman and James Bevel spoke that night. They talked about the right to vote. They talked about the 15th Amendment to the Constitution passed in 1870, which said that black men had the right to vote. They talked about how Mississippi had stolen that right through violence, intimidation, and legal tricks. They talked about voter registration drives and the power of the ballot. And Fannie Lou Hamer, sitting in that church at 44 years old, heard something she had never heard before. Black people have the right to vote. She couldn't believe it. She literally could not believe it. She said later, "I didn't know black people could register to vote." She had lived in America for 44 years, and nobody had ever told her she had the right to vote. Not one teacher, not one newspaper, not one politician. In 44 years, the idea that she could participate in democracy had never reached her. That's not an accident. That's not an oversight. That's systematic suppression. Mississippi had 22,000 black people of voting age in Sunflower County where Fannie lived. Only 161 were registered to vote. That's less than 1%. Less than 1%. And it wasn't because black people didn't want to vote. It was because Mississippi made it nearly impossible. But Fannie heard the truth that night, and something inside her woke up. These young SNCC workers asked who would volunteer to go to the courthouse and try to register. It was dangerous. Everyone knew it was dangerous. The Ku Klux Klan was active. White citizens' councils terrorized black people who tried to vote. People lost their jobs. People lost their homes. People lost their lives. Fannie Lou Hamer stood up. She said, "I'll go. I want to register." After 44 years of silence, after 44 years of invisibility, Fannie Lou Hamer decided she was done being quiet. On August 31, 1962, Fannie and 17 other black residents boarded a bus to Indianola, the county seat, 26 miles from Ruleville. The bus was old and the ride was hot, but they were determined. They sang freedom songs on the way. They prayed. They knew they might not come back. When they arrived at the courthouse Mississippi State Highway, patrol cars were already there. Police surrounded the courthouse. They'd been tipped off. They knew black people were coming to register, and they were ready to stop them. The registrar said only 2 people could come in at a time. Fannie was one of the first 2. She walked into that courthouse with her head high. She'd picked cotton her whole life. She'd survived poverty-forced sterilization and 44 years of Jim Crow. A courthouse didn't scare her. They gave her a literacy test. Not a simple test. Not, "Can you read and write your name?" They gave her a section of the Mississippi Constitution and told her to copy it and interpret it. The section they gave her was deliberately complex, full of legal language that even lawyers struggled with. She was supposed to explain what it meant. Fannie did her best. She read it carefully. She wrote her interpretation, but she knew she hadn't passed. The test wasn't designed for anyone to pass. It was designed to fail black people while passing white people. A white person could walk in, barely write their name and get registered. A black person could be a genius and get rejected. The registrar looked at her test and said, "You failed. You're not qualified to vote." Fannie asked what she got wrong. He refused to tell her. He just said, "You failed. Get out." She walked out of that courthouse rejected but not defeated. She got back on the bus with the others. They didn't succeed that day, but they had tried. That was the first step. That was the crack in the wall. On the way home, Mississippi Highway Patrol pulled the bus over. The officer said the bus was the wrong color. Said it looked too much like a school bus. It was a made-up violation, a harassment tactic. He fined the driver $100. That was a fortune. They didn't have it. But they had to pay, or the driver would go to jail. The community pulled together money to pay the fine. They got back on the bus and drove home. Fannie thought the worst was over. She thought she'd tried to register, failed, and that would be the end of it. She'd go back to the plantation and keep picking cotton. But she was wrong. When Fannie got home that evening, W.D. Marlowe, the plantation owner, was waiting for her. He was furious. Word had already gotten back to him. Fannie Lou Hamer, his timekeeper, his trusted worker, had gone to the courthouse to register to vote. That was unacceptable. That was rebellion. Marlowe told her, "Fannie Lou, if you don't go back and withdraw your registration, you'll have to leave." He didn't yell. He didn't threaten violence. He just stated it as fact. "Withdraw your registration or get out." Fannie looked at him and said something that would define the rest of her life. She said, "I didn't go down there to register for you. I went down to register for myself." Marlowe told her to leave immediately. "Pack your things and go." Fannie had lived on that plantation for 18 years. 18 years of her life. Her home, her job, her entire existence was tied to that land. And in one moment it was gone. Because she tried to vote. She left that day. She didn't have a car. She didn't have savings. She had the clothes on her back and the knowledge that she'd just lost everything. Pap stayed behind temporarily to finish the harvest season. Fannie went to stay with friends in Ruleville. And instead of giving up, instead of withdrawing her registration like Marlowe demanded, Fannie Lou Hamer joined SNCC as a field organizer. They paid her $10 a week. $10. Barely anything. But it was enough. Because this wasn't about money anymore. This was about freedom. Fannie started traveling around Mississippi, going to churches, going to community centers, teaching Black people about their right to vote. She told them her story. She told them what it cost her. And she told them it was worth it. She said, "They can fire me, but they can't stop me. They can kick me off the land, but they can't silence me." But Mississippi wasn't done with Fannie Lou Hamer, not by a long shot. In December 1962, Fannie went back to Indianola to take the literacy test again. She failed again. In January 1963, she went back a third time. This time, she passed. She became a registered voter. But passing the test didn't mean she could vote. Mississippi had a poll tax. You had to pay money to vote. Fannie didn't have the money, so she still couldn't actually cast a ballot. But she was registered. That was progress. Then one night in late 1962, someone fired 16 bullets into the house where Fannie was staying in Ruleville. 16 bullets through the walls while she and her family slept inside. Nobody was hit. It was a miracle. It was a warning. They were telling her to stop. They were telling her that next time the bullets wouldn't miss. Fannie didn't stop. She kept organizing. She kept teaching. She kept registering voters. She said, "If they kill me, they kill me. But I'm not stopping. Because if I stop, they win. And I'm not letting them win." In June 1963, Fannie traveled to Charleston, South Carolina for a voter education workshop. SNCC was training organizers from across the South. They taught strategies for registering voters dealing with violence and staying safe. It was a productive trip. Fannie learned new tactics. She met other organizers. She came back energized and ready to keep fighting. On June 9, 1963, Fannie and several other activists were on a bus heading back to Mississippi. They stopped in Winona, Mississippi to use the restroom and get food. Winona was a small town hostile to civil rights workers, but they didn't have a choice. They needed to stop. Fannie and 5 others, including Annell Ponder June Johnson and Uvister Simpson, walked into a small cafe called Staley's. They sat down at the counter. It was the white section. Segregation was still the law in Mississippi, despite federal court rulings saying otherwise. The cafe owner refused to serve them. He told them to leave. When they didn't leave fast enough, he called the police. Within minutes, police arrived and arrested everyone. They didn't charge them with anything specific. They just arrested them for sitting at a lunch counter. They took them to the Montgomery County Jail in Winona. And that's where the nightmare began. The police separated them into different cells. They beat some of them immediately. June Johnson, a 15-year-old girl, was beaten so badly she could barely stand. Annell Ponder was beaten. But the worst, the absolute worst, was reserved for Fannie Lou Hamer. Officers took Fannie into a cell and ordered her to lie face down on a bunk. Then they brought in 2 black male prisoners. They gave these men blackjacks, which are leather pouches filled with lead shot, and they told these men to beat Fannie. If you don't beat her, you're next. That was the threat. So these men, terrified for their own lives, beat Fannie Lou Hamer. The first man beat her until his arms got tired. Then they switched. The second man continued. Fannie screamed. She begged them to stop. The officers laughed. One officer put his knee on her back to hold her down. Another officer lifted her dress to expose her skin so the blows would hurt more. Fannie said later that she couldn't describe the pain. She said they beat her until her body went numb until her flesh became hard as wood. Her kidneys ruptured. Blood filled her left eye, and she lost vision in it permanently. Her leg was damaged so badly, she walked with a limp for the rest of her life. She couldn't sit or lie down comfortably ever again. At some point during the beating, Fannie heard one of the officers say, "We could throw her in the big black river, and nobody would ever find her." They were discussing murdering her and disposing of her body. She was lying on that bunk, broken and bleeding, listening to white men casually talk about killing her like she was garbage. They didn't kill her. Maybe because SNCC knew where she was. Maybe because too many people saw her get arrested. Maybe because even these monsters had a limit. But they came close. They beat her nearly to death, and they made sure she'd suffer for the rest of her life. After 3 days in that jail, SNCC organizers raised bail money and got Fannie out. When her friends saw her, they cried. Her face was swollen beyond recognition. She could barely walk. She was in agony. They took her to get medical care, but the damage was done. The injuries would never fully heal. Most people would have gone home after that. Most people would have said, "I tried. I almost died. I'm done." But Fannie Lou Hamer wasn't most people. She rested for a few weeks, then she went right back to organizing, because she understood something fundamental. If they could beat her into silence, they would beat everyone into silence. The only way to win was to refuse to be broken. And Fannie Lou Hamer refused to be broken. But what she was about to do next would change American politics forever. Because in 1 year, she would take that broken body, that stolen voice, and she would stand before the entire nation and tell them exactly what Mississippi did to her. And when she asked, "Is this America?" the whole country would have to answer. Hold on to that thought, because what happened in Atlantic City in 1964 is the reason they tried to erase Fannie Lou Hamer from history. What she did there terrified the most powerful politicians in America. And when you understand why, you'll understand exactly how much power one truth-telling woman can have. But before we get to Atlantic City, you need to understand what was happening in Mississippi in 1964. You need to understand Freedom Summer, because that's the movement Fannie was leading. And what they did that summer would expose Mississippi's evil to the entire world. By 1964, Mississippi was a war zone. Not officially, not in the news. But if you were black and living there, you knew. Every day was a battle for survival. Every act of resistance risked your life. And the federal government watched and did almost nothing. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee decided to force America to pay attention. They launched Freedom Summer, a massive voter registration campaign that would bring hundreds of volunteers into Mississippi. Most of them were white college students from the North. That was strategic. SNCC knew something ugly but true. America didn't care when black people were murdered in Mississippi. It happened all the time and barely made the news. But if white college kids started dying, America would have to pay attention. Fannie Lou Hamer was a central organizer of Freedom Summer. She traveled across the state training volunteers, teaching them how to register voters, warning them about the dangers. She told them, "You might die here. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because it's true. But if we don't fight now, we'll never be free." On June 21, 1964, 3 Freedom Summer volunteers disappeared. James Chaney, a black man from Mississippi. Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, white men from New York. They were investigating a church burning in Neshoba County. They were arrested by local police for speeding, held for several hours, then released after dark. They drove away from the jail and were never seen alive again. The Ku Klux Klan, working with local law enforcement, abducted them. They drove them to a remote area. They shot all 3 of them. James Chaney, the black volunteer, was beaten so badly before being shot that his bones were broken and his skull was fractured. They wanted to make an example of him. They wanted other black people to know what happened when you challenged white supremacy. The FBI launched a massive search. It took 44 days to find the bodies. They were buried in an earthen dam. But here's what most people don't know. During that search, FBI agents found 8 other bodies. 8 other black men who had been murdered and dumped in rivers and swamps. 8 murders that nobody had investigated. 8 families who never got justice. The FBI wasn't looking for them. They were looking for the white volunteers. But they stumbled across 8 bodies anyway. That tells you how common it was. How many black people were murdered in Mississippi, and nobody even looked for them. Eventually, 18 men were arrested for the murders of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. 18. That included the local sheriff and his deputy. Law enforcement participated in the murder. This wasn't criminals acting alone. This was the state of Mississippi murdering civil rights workers. 7 of the men were convicted. Not of murder. Mississippi refused to charge them with murder. They were convicted of federal civil rights violations. The sentences ranged from 3 to 10 years. Some served less than 3 years. None of them showed remorse. Some of them bragged about it in bars afterward. That was Mississippi in 1964. That was what Fannie Lou Hamer was organizing in. She knew those men. She knew James Cheney. She mourned him. And she kept going. Because stopping meant they won. But Fannie wasn't just registering voters. She was building something bigger. She was building a political party. The Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. The MFDP. And it was about to shake American politics to its core. Here's the problem Fannie saw. Mississippi had an official delegation to the Democratic National Convention. These were the people who represented Mississippi at the convention, where Democrats would nominate their presidential candidate. But Mississippi's delegation was all white. Every single person, in a state that was 40% black. And none of those delegates supported civil rights. They supported segregation. They supported George Wallace. They were Democrats, in name only. So Fannie and other organizers asked a simple question. If Mississippi's official delegation doesn't represent black people, and black people can't vote to choose a different delegation, why don't we create our own? Why don't we form a party that actually represents all Mississippians, black and white, and challenge the official delegation? That's exactly what they did. They formed the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in April 1964. They held their own precinct meetings, their own county conventions, their own state convention. They followed all the rules. They did everything the Democratic Party required. And they elected 68 delegates to go to the Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City, New Jersey in August 1964. Fannie Lou Hamer was one of those delegates. A sharecropper who'd been beaten nearly to death 1 year earlier was now going to Atlantic City to challenge the entire Democratic Party. The Democratic National Convention opened on August 24, 1964, in Atlantic City. President Lyndon Johnson was expecting a smooth convention. He'd become president after Kennedy's assassination. He'd pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He wanted the convention to be a celebration. He wanted to be nominated without controversy. He wanted to focus on defeating Republican Barry Goldwater in the general election. Then the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party showed up. The MFDP delegates demanded to be seated as the official Mississippi delegation. They argued that they represented all of Mississippi, not just white Mississippi. They argued that the official delegation was illegally chosen because black people were systematically prevented from participating. They demanded justice. The Democratic National Committee held hearings. They let both delegations present their cases. The official all-white delegation said they were the legitimate representatives chosen according to Mississippi law. The MFDP said Mississippi law was illegitimate because it excluded black people. On August 22, 1964, the the Credentials Committee held a nationally televised hearing. And Fannie Lou Hamer testified. She sat before that committee, before those cameras, before the entire nation, and she told her story. She spoke in a strong, clear voice. She didn't read from notes. She spoke from memory, from pain, from experience. She described going to register to vote in 1962. She described being fired from her job and kicked off the plantation where she'd worked for 18 years. She described the night her house was shot up with 16 bullets. Then she described Winona. She described June 9, 1963. She described being arrested for sitting at a lunch counter. She described being taken to jail. And then, in detail, she described the beating. She said, "They carried me in a room, and they began to beat me with a thick leather thing that was loaded with something heavy. I screamed to God in pain. My dress worked itself up, and one of the men walked over and pulled my dress down. Then they made me lay down on my stomach, and they beat me until I was exhausted." She told the committee about the 2 black prisoners who were forced to beat her. She told them about the white officers who gave the orders. She told them about the kidney damage, and the eye damage, and the leg damage. She told them everything. Then she looked into the camera and asked the question that would echo through history. All of this is on account we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off the hooks because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Is this America? Those 3 words. Is this America? That question forced the nation to confront what it was allowing to happen in Mississippi. Fannie wasn't asking rhetorically. She was demanding an answer. Is this who you are? Is this what America means? Because if it is, then everything you say about freedom and democracy is a lie. The television networks were broadcasting Fannie's testimony live. Millions of Americans were watching. President Johnson panicked. He was watching from the White House, and he knew this testimony was devastating. He knew it made him and the Democratic Party look complicit in Mississippi's violence, so he did something desperate. He called an emergency press conference, right in the middle of Fannie's testimony. He interrupted the networks to announce something meaningless, some minor update that didn't require a press conference. His only goal was to get the cameras off Fannie Lou Hamer. He wanted to silence her. But it didn't work. The networks recorded the rest of her testimony. And that night, during prime time, they played the whole thing. More people saw Fannie's testimony in prime time than would have seen it live. Johnson's attempt to silence her backfired. He gave her an even bigger audience. The next day, telegrams flooded the Democratic National Committee. Phone calls poured in. Americans from across the country demanded that the MFDP be seated. They demanded that Fannie Lou Hamer and her delegates be recognized. The pressure was enormous, but Johnson had a problem. If he seated the MFDP, the entire Southern white delegation would walk out. Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina. All the Deep South states threatened to leave the convention and maybe even leave the Democratic Party. Johnson needed those states to win the election. He couldn't afford to lose the South, so he offered a compromise. The MFDP could have 2 at-large seats, not as the Mississippi delegation, but as general delegates. 2 seats out of 68. And the Democratic Party would promise to ban discriminatory delegations in the future. Starting in 1968, all delegations would have to be integrated. Most politicians thought this was a good compromise. 2 seats, plus a promise of change. That's progress, right? But Fannie Lou Hamer said no. She refused the compromise. She said, "We didn't come all this way for no 2 seats when all of us is tired." Think about that. She said no to the President of the United States. She said no to the most powerful political machine in America. She said no because 2 seats wasn't justice. 2 seats was an insult. They came representing 68 delegates who were democratically chosen. They came representing hundreds of thousands of Black Mississippians who couldn't vote. And they were offered 2 seats as a consolation prize. Fannie said no. The MFDP said no. They didn't get seated at the 1964 convention. The all-white Mississippi delegation was seated instead. Technically, the MFDP lost, but actually they won, because they forced the Democratic Party to change its rules. In 1968, integrated delegations were required. By 1972, the Democratic Party had completely reformed how it chose delegates. More women, more minorities, more representation. The entire system changed because of what Fannie Lou Hamer did in Atlantic City in 1964, and Fannie herself became a national figure. Before Atlantic City, she was a sharecropper activist that most Americans had never heard of. After Atlantic City, she was famous. She was a symbol of the civil rights movement. She was a hero, and she used that platform to keep fighting. In 1965, Fannie ran for Congress. She ran in Mississippi's 2nd District, challenging the white incumbent. She knew she wouldn't win. Black people still couldn't vote freely. But she ran anyway to show it was possible. She got some votes, not enough, but she proved that Black candidates could run. In 1968, Fannie was chosen as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention again. This time, under the new rules, she was seated. She became the first Black woman from Mississippi to be an official delegate to a Democratic convention. The same woman they beat in 1963 and tried to silence in 1964 was now sitting in the hall as an official voting delegate. That's victory. But Fannie didn't just focus on politics. She understood that voting rights meant nothing if people were starving. She understood that political power required economic power. So in 1969, she founded the Freedom Farm Cooperative. The idea was simple: buy land, grow food, feed poor families, build wealth in the Black community. Freedom Farm bought 640 acres in Sunflower County, Mississippi. They grew vegetables, raised pigs, and distributed food to families who needed it. At its peak, Freedom Farm was feeding 1,500 families. Fannie called it a pig bank. Families would receive a pregnant pig. When the pig had babies, they'd keep some and give some back to Freedom Farm so other families could benefit. It was community wealth building. It was mutual aid. It was exactly what Fannie knew her people needed. But Freedom Farm struggled financially. They couldn't get loans from banks. They couldn't get support from the federal government. By 1976, the farm was bankrupt. They lost the land. It failed. But it failed because the system was designed to make it fail. Black farmers couldn't get the subsidies that white farmers got. Black cooperatives couldn't get the loans that white businesses got. The economic system was rigged, just like the political system. Fannie knew that. She said, "You can give people the right to vote, but if they're hungry, they can't think about voting. They're thinking about food. We need political rights and economic rights. Both or neither." Throughout the 1970s, Fannie continued speaking, organizing, fighting. She spoke at universities. She testified before Congress. She worked with the National Women's Political Caucus. She fought for welfare rights, housing rights, healthcare. She understood that freedom wasn't just about voting. Freedom meant a decent life for everyone. But the Winona beating had destroyed her health. The kidney damage never healed. She developed chronic health problems. She had diabetes. She had heart disease. She was in pain constantly. She could barely walk. But she kept working. On March 14th, Fannie Lou Hamer died in a hospital in Mound Bayou, Mississippi. She was 59 years old. She died of complications from diabetes, heart disease, and the injuries she'd sustained in Winona 14 years earlier. Those police officers killed her slowly. It just took 14 years for her body to finally give out. She died poor. She and Pap never accumulated wealth. They never owned land. They never had financial security. The community had to raise money for her funeral. But 1,500 people came. 1,500 people filled the church to say goodbye to Fannie Lou Hamer. Andrew Young, who would become a congressman and ambassador, gave the eulogy. He said none of us would be where we are now had she not been there then. Fannie was buried in Ruleville, Mississippi, in the town where she'd lived and fought. Her tombstone reads, "I am sick and tired of being sick and tired." The words that defined her, the words that captured her righteous anger and her refusal to accept injustice. But here's what they didn't tell you. For decades after her death, Fannie Lou Hamer was barely mentioned in history books. She wasn't taught in schools. Most Americans had no idea who she was. They knew Martin Luther King. They knew Rosa Parks. But Fannie erased. Why? Because she was too radical. Because she said no to the president. Because she fought for economic justice, not just political rights. Because she refused to be nonviolent when violence was used against her. She said, "I'm not nonviolent. I believe in self-defense." She said, "You can pray all you want, but you better have a gun too." That didn't fit the sanitized civil rights narrative they wanted to teach. They wanted heroes who were patient, peaceful, and forgiving. Fannie was angry, demanding, and uncompromising. So they buried her story. Until recently. Until people started demanding the real history. And now, finally, Fannie Lou Hamer is being remembered. In 2019, Mississippi erected a statue of Fannie Lou Hamer in the state capitol. The same state that beat her, terrorized her, and tried to silence her now honors her with a statue. Some people call that progress. Some people call that hypocrisy. Both are true. Now you know Fannie's story. But knowing her story isn't enough. You need to understand that what happened to her wasn't unique. She was one of thousands. Thousands of black people who tried to vote and were beaten, murdered, and terrorized. This wasn't a few bad actors. This was systematic. This was policy. And it happened everywhere in the South, not just Mississippi. Let me prove it to you. Let me show you the pattern. Because once you see it, you can never unsee it. And you'll understand that voter suppression didn't end in 1965. It just changed tactics. In 1965, after years of activism and violence, Congress finally passed the Voting Rights Act. It banned literacy tests. It sent federal registrars to the South to register black voters. It gave the federal government power to oversee elections in states with a history of discrimination. It was supposed to end voter suppression. And it worked. In Mississippi, black voter registration went from 7% in 1964 to 59% in 1967. In Alabama, it went from 23% to 57%. Across the South, black people finally started voting in large numbers. That's what the Voting Rights Act did. But let me tell you something about power. Power doesn't give up easily. Power adapts. When you take away one tool of oppression, power invents a new one. And that's exactly what happened with voting. They couldn't use literacy tests anymore. They couldn't use poll taxes. Those were illegal. So they found new ways. Voter ID laws, closing polling places in black neighborhoods, purging voter rolls, reducing early voting hours, exact match signature requirements, felony disenfranchisement. Every single one of these tactics disproportionately affects black voters. Every single one. In 2013, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. Shelby County v. Holder. The court said that the pre-clearance requirement, the part that made southern states get federal approval before changing voting laws, was no longer necessary. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that things have changed dramatically since 1965, and racial discrimination in voting is no longer a problem. Within 24 hours of that decision, Texas announced a strict voter ID law. Within weeks, North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, and other southern states passed new voting restrictions. All the states that had been under federal oversight immediately passed laws making it harder to vote. If racial discrimination wasn't a problem anymore, why did they do that? Let me give you specifics. In Georgia in 2018, Brian Kemp was Secretary of State, meaning he was in charge of elections. He was also running for governor against Stacey Abrams, a black woman. While running for governor, Kemp purged over 1.4 million people from the voter rolls. 1.4 million. He claimed they were inactive voters or had moved. But investigations found that most of them were still eligible and living at the same address. They were just purged. Most of them were black and brown voters. Kemp won the election by 55,000 votes. He purged 1.4 million voters and won by 55,000. Think about that. And nobody went to jail. Nobody was charged. It was legal. That's the system. In North Dakota in 2018, they passed a law requiring a street address to vote. Sounds reasonable, right? Except it was designed to prevent Native Americans from voting. Many Native Americans live on reservations and use P.O. boxes, not street addresses. The law was specifically designed to disenfranchise them. Courts eventually blocked it, but not before thousands of Native people couldn't vote. In Texas, you can use a gun license as voter ID, but not a student ID. Why? Because gun owners tend to vote Republican and students tend to vote Democrat. It's not about fraud, it's about controlling who votes. In Florida, voters passed an amendment in 2018 restoring voting rights to felons who had completed their sentences. 1.4 million people. The Republican legislature immediately passed a law saying felons had to pay all court fees and fines before voting. Many of them owe thousands of dollars. If you can't pay, you can't vote. That's a poll tax. Poll taxes were banned in 1964, but Florida reinvented it and called it something else. Do you see the pattern? They took away the old tools, so they invented new ones. Literacy tests became voter ID laws. Poll taxes became court fees. Terrorism became bureaucracy. But the goal is the same. Keep black people from voting. Keep poor people from voting. Keep anyone who might challenge power from voting. And it's not just laws, it's logistics. In the 2020 election, the average wait time to vote in white neighborhoods was 10 minutes. In black neighborhoods, it was 45 minutes, sometimes hours. Why? Because black precincts have fewer voting machines, fewer poll workers, fewer resources. That's not an accident. That's by design. When Fannie Lou Hamer tried to vote in 1962, they used a literacy test to stop her. In 2020, they used long lines and closed polling places. Different tactics. Same goal. And most Americans don't even realize it's happening because it looks legal. It looks neutral. It looks like bureaucracy, not racism. But Fannie would recognize it immediately. She'd say, they're still doing it. They just changed the language. And here's what makes it even more insidious. They erased the history. They took Fannie's story out of textbooks so you wouldn't know what voter suppression looks like. They sanitized the civil rights movement so you'd think it's over. They taught you that racism ended with Martin Luther King's dream and Obama's presidency. They lied to you because if you knew the truth, if you knew what Fannie suffered, if you knew that people died for the right to vote, you'd be furious. You'd demand justice. You'd fight back. So they buried the history. They erased Fannie Lou Hamer. They erased Medgar Evers. They erased the Winona beating and the Freedom Summer murders and the Mississippi appendectomy. They erased all of it so you'd think everything is fine now. But it's not fine. In 2021, 19 states passed laws restricting voting. 19. Georgia made it illegal to give food and water to people waiting in line to vote. Think about that. You can't give someone a bottle of water while they wait 3 hours to vote. That's not about election security. That's about making voting so miserable that people give up. And when Black communities organize and fight back, when Stacey Abrams registers hundreds of thousands of new voters in Georgia, when people march and protest and demand their rights, they get accused of cheating. They get accused of fraud. The same lie they told in Fannie's time. When Black people vote, it's called fraud. When white people vote, it's called democracy. Fannie Lou Hamer would recognize this immediately. She'd say, we're still fighting the same fight. The weapons changed, but the war is the same. And it's not just voting. Remember the Mississippi appendectomy. Remember how they forcibly sterilized Black women? They stopped doing that. Mostly. But then in 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Suddenly, abortion is banned in the same states that used to forcibly sterilize Black women. Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas. The same states. In the 1960s, white doctors sterilized Black women without consent because they didn't want Black people having children. In 2025, those same states ban abortion, forcing women to have children against their will. Then they did not want you to have children. Now they force you to have children even if it kills you. Either way, white men control Black women's bodies. And Black women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. 3 times. In Mississippi, Black maternal mortality is even higher. So when you ban abortion in states with the worst maternal health care, you're sentencing Black women to death. That's not pro-life, that's pro-death. Fannie would see right through it. She'd say, they took my womb without asking. Now they won't let women choose. It was never about babies. It's about power over us. The economic piece is still true too. Fannie tried to build Freedom Farm Cooperative to create Black wealth. It failed because they couldn't get loans or subsidies. Today, the median white household has $189,000 in wealth. The median Black household has $24,000. That's not because Black people don't work hard. That's because every time Black people build wealth, it gets destroyed or stolen. Fannie's family never owned land because sharecropping kept them in debt. Your grandparents couldn't buy homes because of redlining. Your parents faced discrimination in lending. Now you face gentrification, where white developers buy up Black neighborhoods and push Black families out. Same theft. New name. Fannie understood this. She said, you can't have political freedom without economic freedom. Giving Black people the right to vote doesn't mean anything if they're too poor to take a day off work to vote. It doesn't mean anything if they lose their job for voting. It doesn't mean anything if they're evicted for voting. You need both, political and economic justice. We still don't have either. Not fully, not yet. But we're fighting for it, just like Fannie fought. And that brings us to you. What are you going to do with this knowledge? You now know what Fannie Lou Hamer suffered. You know what it cost to vote. You know that people were beaten, murdered, and terrorized. You know that the fight isn't over. You know that voter suppression is happening right now in new forms. So what are you going to do? Some of you are thinking, this is too much. This is too heavy. I just want to live my life. I understand that. Fannie understood that too. She was tired. She said it herself. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. But she kept fighting because she knew that if she quit, they win. And she refused to let them win. You're tired too, I know. You're tired of racism, tired of injustice, tired of fighting for things that should be basic rights, tired of explaining, tired of proving, tired of surviving. I know. Your ancestors were tired too, but they fought anyway. For you. Fannie Lou Hamer picked cotton for 44 years. She didn't know she could vote. She was forcibly sterilized. She was beaten nearly to death. She was terrorized, threatened, and impoverished. And she still fought. She still organized. She still spoke truth to power. She still said no to the President of the United States. Why not? Because she was superhuman. Not because she wasn't afraid. Not because she didn't feel pain. But because she understood that freedom requires sacrifice. She understood that justice doesn't come from asking nicely. It comes from demanding, from organizing, from refusing to quit. She fought for you. You wouldn't be able to vote today if Fannie hadn't fought. You wouldn't have the rights you have if she hadn't risked everything. She paid the price. She gave her body, her health, her life. For you, now it's your turn. Not to suffer like she suffered. Not to be beaten like she was beaten. But to use what she gave you. To honor her sacrifice by voting in every election. Local, state, federal. All of them. To register other people to vote. To fight voter suppression when you see it. To demand economic justice, not just political rights. To tell her story so she's never erased again. If this video shook you, comment sick and tired below. If you never learned this in school, comment erased. If you're ready to honor Fannie by taking action, comment ready. Your comments push this video to more people. Your comments fight the algorithm. Your comments keep her story alive. Hit that like button. Not because you like what happened to Fannie, but because you refuse to let her story be buried. Share this video with your church, with your family, with your friends who say voting doesn't matter. Show them what Fannie paid to vote. Show them why it matters. And subscribe, because this channel is telling the stories they erased. Robert F. Williams, the NAACP leader, who said, "Arm yourselves." Claudette Colvin, the real first person to refuse to give up her seat. The Freedom Farm Cooperative, and how economic justice was stolen. Hundreds of stories, all erased, all being brought back. If you don't subscribe, you'll miss them. And this knowledge is too important to miss. This is your history. This is your inheritance. This is the truth they tried to bury. Fannie Lou Hamer was not perfect. She made mistakes. She was human, but she was unbreakable. They tried to break her body. They succeeded. She lived in pain for 14 years after Winona, but they never broke her spirit. They never silenced her voice. They never made her quit. You carry her legacy. You are her answered prayer. You are what she fought for. You have rights today because she bled for them. You can vote because she was beaten for trying. You have a voice because she refused to be silenced. Don't waste it. Don't stay home. Don't stay quiet. Use what she gave you. Vote like Fannie fought for you to vote. Organize like she organized. Speak like she spoke. Demand justice like she demanded it. Build wealth like she tried to build Freedom Farm. Pass this legacy to your children. Tell them about Fannie Lou Hamer. Tell them about the sharecropper who said no to the president. Tell them about the woman who asked, "Is this America?" and forced the nation to answer. You are powerful. You are necessary. You are anointed. You are destined for more than struggle. You are heirs to Fannie's courage. You are warriors in her tradition. You are unbreakable, like she was unbreakable. God preserved Fannie through sharecropping poverty. Why God brought her through the Winona beating. Why God gave her a voice before the nation. Why? Because she had a mission. And you have a mission too. Your mission is to tell the truth, to demand justice, to vote, to organize, to build, to fight. Not with violence, but with the same courage Fannie had, the same refusal to quit, the same determination to be free. God doesn't want you patient. God wants you free. God doesn't want you waiting for white people to grant you rights. God wants you demanding what's already yours. That's what Fannie believed. That's what she lived. And that's what she died trying to give you. Now bow your heads with me. Father God, we come to you with hearts full of grief and fire. Grief for Fannie Lou Hamer, who gave her body her health, her life for justice. Grief for the womb they stole from her without permission. Grief for the beating that left her broken, but not defeated. Grief for the poverty she endured while lifting others toward freedom. We thank you for raising her up from sharecropper to prophet. We thank you for preserving her voice when they tried to silence her. We thank you for her testimony that shook a nation. We thank you that her words still echo. Is this America? Is this America? Lord, we pray for justice. We pray that every voter suppression law would be struck down. We pray that every person who beat Fannie would face judgment, if not in this life, in the next. We pray that the Democratic Party would remember what she fought for and honor it. We pray for the 1,500 families Freedom Farm fed, that her legacy of economic justice would multiply. We pray for every person watching this video. Give them Fannie's courage. Give them her refusal to stay silent. Give them her faith that God sides with the oppressed. Give them her determination to fight even when broken. Make us like Fannie. Not perfect, not peaceful when peace means surrender, but unbreakable. Make us warriors who refuse to quit. Make us voices that refuse to be silenced. Make us voters who honor those who died for the right, until every vote is counted, until every voice is heard, until justice rolls down like waters, and righteousness like an everlasting stream. In Jesus' name, the same Jesus Fannie sang to while they beat her. Amen. Fannie Lou Hamer said, "Nobody's free until everybody's free." You're not free yet, but you're closer because she fought. Now it's your turn. Walk in her footsteps. Fight with her courage. Vote with her sacrifice in mind. She was sick and tired. So are you. Good. Use that. Turn that exhaustion into fuel, that anger into action, that pain into power. You are Fannie's legacy. You are her answered prayer. You are what she died fighting for. Don't waste it. Don't stay silent. Don't stay home. Vote, organize, speak, build, fight, like Fannie did, like she taught you to do. God bless you. Stay dangerous. Stay truthful. Stay free.